All right, today on the sportsbackroom.com, we are here with Johnny Love. He is a handicapper for the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. Not just that, though. The purpose of this interview is to just see the journey of a life through sports, through various sports. Johnny, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me on. How you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm really excited to just jump into your journey here. Now, we're going to talk about it later. But you used to be a wrestler, correct? A professional wrestler.
I was a professional wrestler in the 1980s. I think my first year was 1986, and I wrestled all around to like 1993.
Now, like I said, we'll touch on this later. I need to know for my juvenile attention span, what was your wrestling name?
Well, it was Johnny Love, but as I traveled around, I wrestled in Europe, and I went to Calgary, and they would change, I think in Calgary they wanted to call me Jimmy Bon Jovi, John's brother, which I'm like, is that legal? Because the Bon Jovi group was, it was pretty hot at the time in the 80s with the Crypt Up Here doing stuff, which I had. But I did a lot of tag teams too, which different names. So, it changed as you went around. It's a carnival.
Okay. Jimmy Bon Jovi. Okay. Now, take us back to high school. How were you just playing different sports? Like, what was high school like?
Yeah, high school was, I was a multi-sport player, which is hard to find these days. But, I played basketball and baseball and football. And I was actually pretty small. I was about $135 my sophomore year, and I was a decent basketball and baseball player, but I wasn't very good at football. And then I got in a fight my sophomore year, and I lost, and I was like, I gotta get big, and I started lifting weights. And by the time I was a senior, I was 188 pounds, and then I was a better football player than I was at basketball or baseball.
So did you?
And then, go ahead.
Well, okay. Let's just say one of the launch paths for you going forward was just losing a fight and deciding to be bigger.
Well, the funny thing about that fight was it was a sophomore basketball game, and we were playing a team that was pretty good, and they had 99 points. And the coach told me to dribble around so they wouldn't get 100 points. So I dribbled. I was a pretty good basketball player, and I dribbled around. I was the smallest guy in the court, and they didn't get their 100 points. Well, one of the guys on my own team did not like that and just sucker punched me at the end of the game, and right on the floor. And then my brother came down from the stands and started beating him up, and it was a big brawl. And it was embarrassing to me that, one of my own players just started punching me, and he sucker punched me, and my brother had to come down and protect me, and that was it. That night I'm like, I gotta get big, and that's how it all started, and then I started lifting weights from there.
So that was your first tag team.
Well, more or less was, because my brother and I were wrestling fans as we were little kids, but that pretty much was it. But it was a story that was told many times around the high school, that there was a fight amongst the own teammates after the game. They really had to went to the floor.
Oh wow! So what was your expectation of college? Where'd you go, and what did you want to do in college?
When I left high school, I went to a junior college, and I didn't adapt very well, which I think happens to a lot of young people. I didn't really know how to study. I was always a C average student, and that was it. And when I got to junior college, it was more of a shock. So I went there to play baseball, and then I ended up having a surgery on my shoulder. I ended up dropping out. I became a roofer, and that's like the worst job. And I'm like, I cannot do this for the rest of my life. So one day I read in the paper that Concordia College in St. Paul, Minnesota, which is now Concordia University, was one of the cheapest 4-year colleges in the state. And I went there, but at this time I was weighing 210 pounds. I was a pretty big kid. And I walked into the office, and I told him that I would like to start going to school there and get some information. And by the way, I'd like to talk to the football coach. Well, lo and behold, the football coach was standing right next to me, and he looked and seen how big I was, that he was like, yeah, I'd like to talk to you about football. And that's how that all came about, you know. And I played 4 years there.
So what position did you play?
I was middle linebacker, and I made all conference all 4 years, and I had a good run, and I really enjoyed myself there. I actually played 2 years of baseball there too. But yeah, I ended up graduating, and I enjoyed it there. I just I would have loved to took it to the next level, but man, I just wasn't. I was a slow white guy that just you know, they said, "Oh, Johnny, you can play the next level." I'm like, "No, I can't. I know my limits. I can make a lot of tackles, but I know my limits." So that was my 4 years at Concordia.
No, there's nothing wrong with. I admire guys who know their limits, especially when we're talking about football or basketball going to the next level. I remember I went to West Virginia University. I remember, you know, our graduating class. You know, we have all these guys who were graduating, who were trained for the combine and pro day, and we had one guy who's, I mean, he's all academic, conference. You know, he's never gotten a B in his life. I think he was like third team or honorable mention all conference on the playing field, and he's just like chilling, you know, drinking a shake while we're working out. And one of the freshmen football players, true freshman, asked him like, "Hey, how come you're not training with everybody else? You know, to try out for the league?" And he was like, "I'm done. I'm done. I mean, it was cool while it lasted, but I know that my career is over here at the end of the semester, so I'm done playing ball." And you know, me, I was like, "That's you. Happy for you, but at the same time, have respect for guys who just, whether it's a physical limitation or they just want to pursue other things, to just walk away on your terms. That's noble."
Well, yeah, sure. It's just, you know, I think that sure, I'd love to take it to the next level, but you know, I knew I was 5'11". I was weighing probably 235, but I also ran like a 4.9 40. It just wasn't going to happen. Sideline to sideline, I was quick, but north and south, no. So that was the deal. And but actually, what happened, which turned out to be a great thing, was that I still had another quarter to go, but I had this friend that was in a pro wrestling camp. And that's how that all started, because I said, "Oh, really? I'd like to go watch you do that. I've always been a wrestling fan." So it worked out for the best.
So for those of you scoring at home, where this is funny, you were just a typical high school kid, and you're playing multiple sports, and then you get sucker punched, and you get big, and then you're a roofer for a while. And then you go to college, and then you're a standout player at your college in your conference, and now you're thinking about wrestling? I mean, how was that? Like, how was it a good friend, and was it something you're like, I could do that?
It was a really good friend, but for me, I've always watched pro wrestling. My brother and I, as little kids, we go to pro wrestling matches at the Minneapolis Auditorium. We catch the city bus with my grandma and go through rough neighborhoods and come back at 12:30. That's how much we love wrestling. And then we'd also come home and wrestle with our pillows. And at the time, in the 1980s, the Minneapolis area, the Twin Cities area, was a hotbed for professional wrestlers. All professional wrestlers came out of the Twin Cities if you were going to be in a wrestling camp. I mean, from Ric Flair to Jesse Ventura to the Road Warriors, and the list goes on and on and on. So at that time, there was two major wrestling camps. Vern Gagne had one, and Eddie Sharkey had the other. Well, my friend was in Eddie Sharkey's camp, the same camp that the Road Warriors, Rick Rude, Jesse Ventura, Hogan was there. I mean, it was just a place where everybody came to become a professional wrestler. And I said, yeah, I'd love to go watch you do that. That sounds great. Well, when I went there, I mean, I was like, I can do all that. I can watch that too. And I knew that it was tough. I mean, it was tough. And I tell people this all the time. Wrestling camp, I think I was in camp for 5 months before I had my first match. Was a lot tougher than college football. And I'm not saying that in a way that, you know, make me look tougher, or it just was, because they try to beat you and beat you and beat you. And at that time, if you don't make it, they have your money, and that was part of the deal. And when I went, there was only 3 of us that lasted. But you know, for the stamina part, just getting beaten for a long period of time, yeah, it was tougher than college football for me, you know. But so that's how that all came about. And it was just at a junior high school gym with these mats and these big guys, you know, bouncers and motorcycle guys who all wanted to be wrestlers, were just thumping and punching and learning to fall on your back. And I'm like, oh my gosh. But yeah, and that's how that all came about.
So, when was your first match after you got into that camp?
My first match, David, was, I want to say it was 1986, and I wrestled a guy who was my friend at the time. His wrestling name was Larry the Butcher Cameron, who became a big name. We wrestled each other, very first match. We really didn't know what we were doing. I think we gave each other about 20 clotheslines each, and I was black and blue, and just bumps all over, and I made $35. That's what I got my very first match. And I said, oh, boy, this is going to be a long time before I make my money back that I paid for wrestling camp, which at the time was $2,000. That night, a wrestling promoter said, oh, I like what you guys did. Can you come wrestle at the Minneapolis Armory? Wrestled the very first night. We still didn't have a philosophy of what to do as a wrestler. We just kind of beat each other up again. And that night I got $50. So that was my start to professional wrestling. And I'm just like, oh, my gosh. I mean, I heard about paying your dues, but you really paid your dues before you were ever going to get a push, unless you were huge like the Road Warriors. I mean, they were so big at the time. They did the makeup, and they got started right away. But for guys my size, you better, you know, listen and keep your nose clean and take a beating for a while. And that's what happened. And I didn't even get my first push until I went to Europe. And that's how, you know, I finally started to make a little name for myself.
So when you talk about philosophy, as a wrestler, like, what does that mean? Because I know that there's a portion of our audience that thinks that, like, oh, wrestling's fake, and then there's another portion of our audience where it's like, wrestling is so awesome. I mean, it's not like there's a happy medium. Yeah, oh yeah. There's somewhere in the middle that's, you know, at least I think we can all appreciate the preparation that goes into it. So can you, like, enlighten us on just the philosophy? Like, you were talking about the philosophy of wrestling. Like, what does that mean?
Well, that means that in all wrestling matches, even today, even though it's a different type of wrestling today, you talk to wrestlers, it's old school and now new school, but all wrestling matches have a story. First off, you usually have a good guy or a bad guy, which is called the baby face for the good guy, and the heel is the bad guy. And there's a story to be told in that 10 minutes of the match. Let's say, the first 5 minutes of the heel just starts beating on the baby face, and the baby face makes a big comeback. But then the heel takes over again, then the baby face makes a huge comeback and pins him at the end. That's telling a story. There's certain parts of the story where you're trying to get the crowd's attention to rise them up off their seats and get them off their hands, and there's a story to be told, you know. And as a young wrestler, you don't know how to tell a story yet. You've worked with veterans, so you learn, oh, this is how it works. Oh, at this point, and this mark. And back in the 80s, we talked Carney talk, which was a Z after every first letter, so the audience didn't know what we were talking about. I don't think they do that today, but it's that's the way it worked back then. So that's how you tell a story. There's certain parts of the wrestling match that certain things need to happen where the good guy takes over or the heel takes over.
Now, that's awesome, because that's awesome. I mean, I've always and I mean no disrespect in saying this, but I've always thought that professional wrestling is sort of like a man's soap opera action. It's an action soap opera. And I say that not because of anything other than, like, you get engrossed in what's going on, just like, women get engrossed in their soaps, but this is so much better than that because it's like guys hitting each other. There's guys coming off the top ropes. There's so much more action. And I've always find that fascinating how it's the story that, when you stop and think about it, it's like, this is such a cool production that they're doing.
It really is, and it's such an amazing lifestyle. First of all, I think I was 24 when I started, and believe me, I was a young kid wrestling with people like Mad Dog Rashawn and Wahoo McDaniels, and wrestling in the same. I never wrestled Ric Flair, but at that time, he was at the top of his game, and just to be in the same locker room with these guys was an honor to me. But and they're great athletes, but they're also really tough guys. Tough guys do wrestling, and it is a story, just like you said. It is a story. And as you become a veteran, if you can make it 2 or 3 years, you become better and better, and you get to the point in wrestling where the punches, the punch, it's just lighter. And you work light with your partner. It's all about protecting your partner. You don't want to hurt the guy you're working with. So the promoter comes in before the match, tells you how long, who wins, and then you two work the rest out. And that's how you tell the story. That's how it all starts. And basically, when I was 24, I was like, yes, sir, yes, sir. I'll do whatever you say. And I remember wrestling with Mad Dog Rashawn. I used to watch him as a kid. For me to be in the same ring with this guy was an honor. Or the Sheik, wrestling with the Sheik. And I would just listen to everything they had to say because basically 24, 25, you're still a kid. You might think you know now, but you're still a kid. And that's how we learn from, wrestling with these guys. And then, so when I was a little bit older, then I would help out the younger guys and help tell the story in the match. So that's how it all came about.
Now, you said that you traveled overseas or to Europe. Was that same philosophy intact? I mean, how was it traveling through Europe and wrestling and just comparing it to the hotbed where you grew up in?
It was pretty much the same. For me, I was wrestling. First, the big difference for me was I was wrestling crowds here for 1,000 or less. And then I think my first stop over there was over in Switzerland. The whole arena sold out for like 15,000, 16,000. So that was new to me. Crowds over there, it depends on where you're at, but some will not just boo and cheer. A lot will clap. So like for a good move, they'll clap. So that was new to me, and the baby faces always want the biggest cheer. Well, sometimes that wasn't happening because that just wasn't the way the fans took place for the wrestling match. They would rather stand up and clap if you did a spectacular move or something. But that was about the only difference. There was 20-some of us that went over there, and we worked, I think I worked 26 straight nights one night. And a couple of people got hurt, so we were doing double matches, and one would wear a mask so they didn't know you were wrestling twice. So, like I previously said, it was kind of like a carnival. And at that time, we were wrestling, and Wendy Richter was on our tour, and she was hot at that time doing this rock and roll wrestling thing. It was Cyndi Lauper and Captain Lou Albano. So she drew a big crowd. So it was fun. It was a lot of fun beyond. And I think I was 20. I want to say I was 26 at the time. So it was a great learning experience for me.
Yeah, I mean, that would be mind blowing because you get to. It's like you get to be athletic. You get to play in a sport that is entertaining. Like, think about how many sports other people play, whether they're team sports or not, that, only the enthusiasts love. But wrestling, professional wrestling, you're an entertainer. And I don't care if you're trying to be on American Idol or you're trying to be a basketball player or or even in politics, if you can entertain, it's an awesome feeling. So
it's all about that. It's all about that. And you asking, and I'm not this way. I would say a lot of the older guys, when Hulk Hogan was coming up, Hulk Hogan was not a good wrestler. I mean, that's not even a secret. But he was a heck of an entertainer. The same with Jesse Ventura. Not the greatest wrestler. Had a great tag team partner when they were called the East-West Connection and Adrian Adonis. Not a great wrestler, but boy, you put him on the microphone, holy buckets! Oh gosh, he got everybody riled up. Certain guys are good at that. Ric Flair was good at both. I mean, Ric Flair, when I was a kid, I'd love to see him talk, but I also love to see him wrestle, So some guys have both, but the entertainment part's the main thing. There's so many good athletes that wanted to be pro wrestlers, but they just were stiff, and they just didn't know how to entertain and work the crowd, and I'm sure you can think about now how Hogan worked the crowd, putting his hand next to his ear and listening, and doing the poses. That's entertainment,
Now, I mean, what I just want to ask. This wasn't on my agenda at all, but I mean, what do you think? You wrestled in, I don't want to call it the heyday, but you wrestled in a different era of professional wrestling.
Yeah.
What's it like now compared to with what you grew up, what you actually got to do, and just the state of it now?
Well, I don't really watch it as much because I don't really care for it. I'm not saying, I mean, these guys are doing moves today that it's just surprising that more guys aren't getting hurt. My buddy Jerry Lynn, he just retired, I'm going to say 6 months ago, and he's my age, which is 50. And he was doing these matches were just for extreme wrestling that were just incredible. I'm like, how are you not getting hurt? Well, he was in a lot of pain, and obviously towards the end slowed down, but it's just a whole new era of sex and selling that and wrestling with these moves that are just beyond that. I don't see a lot of these wrestlers, as you can tell, they're not going to last as long. They're just not. Their bodies are shot, and it's just a tough way to make a living. I mean, let's be honest, that a lot of these guys haven't ended up very well. The suicide rate in professional wrestlers is tops. I mean, there's no other sport that comes close to young men dying the way that professional wrestling does. So, I don't know what's the reason. I don't know, but that's just the way the life is. It's a rough lifestyle. But yeah, I just don't watch it. I think there's just too much of this silliness of selling the sex more than selling the wrestling.
Yeah. A lot of products go that route. I mean, I don't want to say product, but just sports brands go that route, and it's. I mean, it is what it is, but to know the purity of just, I mean, I think it would be cool to have grown up in an area where, like, whether it's professional wrestling or, say, like snowboarding or whatever, where it was all about the love of it. It wasn't all the other stuff attached to it. So, I mean, I can understand why, you're not too enamored with it now. I can totally understand that.
I think they also taken the hit from Ultimate Fighting. I think Ultimate Fighting has put a dent in boxing. I think it's put a dent into professional wrestling. You can still find independent cards around here, which I got to tell you the truth. I'd rather go to an independent card here, which is more like old-style wrestling, where there's maybe a couple hundred or 1,000 people compared to, what's out there today with WWE. And those guys are great athletes. It's just something I just have no interest in because it's not something that, first off, I wouldn't want my kids to watch, we're 8 and 10. Mm-hmm. I just wouldn't. There's too much other crap going on in their TV shows besides the wrestling. If they could edit it to just the wrestling, then maybe I'll let the kids watch it. But all this other crap, I mean, you talked about the soap opera before. That's pretty much what it is, but it's R-rated,
Yeah. So how did you get out of wrestling? I mean, was it just you just got to the point where you're like, I think I'm done?
I went to wrestle in Calgary for the Hart family. which they ran the territory up there, and it was a horrible experience. And that was the time when Chris Benoit and the British Bulldogs were up there, and everybody was tormented. Everybody was doing drugs. Everybody was tormented. It was a rough lifestyle. You were working every night. You weren't getting paid very much. And I'm like, really? I'm living in a crappy hotel, and I'm not doing the right things. And I'm like, I got to get out of here. And they weren't paying me. And it's just like I drove home. Me and a couple other wrestlers drove all the way back to Minneapolis 36 hours straight. And that very night, I went to my parents' house because I didn't have a place to live, and I went to this bar, and I saw two old friends of mine that owned this health club, and that was in 1989. And at that point, they wanted to get out, and they said, "Johnny, you want to buy the gym?" But at that time, they were pretty drunk, and I said, "Well, it might be interested, but you might want to talk to me when you're sober." And then the very next morning, we ended up talking again, and I had this interest in this health club called Los Campeones. And I ended up buying one of the guys out, but I didn't have enough money for the other person, and found a business partner. We ended up buying it and took over in January 1990. At that point, I was still wrestling independent shows, and I was working for the AWA a little bit also. And I did a few more matches for them, but then AWA folded, and I just pretty much stuck to the gym from then on. So that was in 1990 I bought the gym, which I held until 2006.
Okay, so from 16 years.
Yeah, 16 years. Well, I mean, it was a crappy place with a lot of rough guys, and kicked some guys out and tried to change the atmosphere. And David, I used to work out there when I was a kid. There used to be needles sticking up in the ceiling from guys doing their steroids, shooting them up. And I'm like, well, this can't happen. Yeah, I'm not going to draw anybody into the gym doing this. So we changed the atmosphere, and we became a successful gym because those guys were losing it. So it worked out. It worked out very well.
So what are, because I think I know a lot of guys, a lot of athletes, they want to start businesses, and they want to, whether it's buy somebody out, or they want to start their own from scratch. How did you change the culture? I mean, you're one of the owners. It's on you. Like, how did you change the culture? How did you mold it into a viable vision that you could actually tolerate?
Well, the first thing I did was 3 guys that had to go. They had to go. And I knew them, so it wasn't difficult. It's not like they were strangers to me, but I told them they couldn't work out at the gym anymore. They set the tone of the bad atmosphere. I never owned a business, but I had a passion. I think a passion is important with anything, But so that was the deal. My business partner at the time had a different job, so I slept on the couch at the gym for 4 months. I worked every hour from 6 a.m. till 10 p.m., and I slept on the couch, and I'd open up in the morning. But I think that's thing that people need to do, and that was my life. I wasn't married, so it was easy for me to live at the gym. And then finally, when my business partner quit his job, it was a relief, but we made it work. But I mean, we did every hour. We didn't have employees. We worked hard. We did the maintenance. We were the counselors. We were the spotters. We were the trainers. We were the bookkeepers. We did it all. So yeah, that's what I think you have to do. But you need to have that passion. Whether it's wrestling or handicapping. But at that time, owning a gym and being a young man and single, yeah, that's, guys have a couple dreams in life. One's owning a bar, one's owning a gym. So, owning businesses, and that came true, and I dug it. I really dug it.
Awesome. Now, you said you sold it in 2006?
Sold it to a partner. I bought out my business partner in about 2004, and my wife and I adopted a boy in 2004, 2005, and we were going to adopt another child. And the youngest, my son at the time, I was bringing him to the gym, and I'm like, really? I don't know. I want to be around the boys much. So I ended up selling the gym in 2006 to one of my employees. And that's how I ended up getting out. I had to make a decision in life, whether to be a father or keep running the business, and I wasn't into the daycare. I wasn't into the nanny. My wife traveled a lot on her job, and to make it work, I thought this would be the best decision.
Now, was it so? It wasn't even about it being hard or a money thing. It was just, hey, like, I don't know what your son's name is, but or the kids that you have, but you just wanted a different lifestyle. Just sort of like driving home from Calgary. Just, no, I'm done. Right?
That was pretty much it. It wasn't much of the fact that I was burning out. I think everybody burns out in their job. No matter what you do in life, you're going to burn out. Everybody goes through those times. And I've been through those many times with the gym. It's just part of being a business owner, part of working for anyone. But it's just that I'm like, yeah, I just thought this was more important for me to do than to be a father and be around my kids and not be around my kids and putting a ton of hours in, and my wife traveling with neither one of us around. So that was the decision. Now the gym's still there. It's doing great. It's just celebrated its 30th year. And it's an amazing gym. It's the oldest gym in the Twin Cities. And I still go out there and work out. So I love being there. It's a place where, you know, everybody knows your name, and it's a great place. It's a lot of people have been through that gym. It's an old school gym.
So after you stopped doing the gym, what did you do next? I mean, I imagine that you made a decent profit from, you know, selling your share of the gym.
Sold the gym, and I took some time off, but I was a personal trainer at the time, so I kept many clients. And I did that, and then my boys were getting a little bit older, so kind of I was a stay-at-home dad and training people and doing this. And then about 3 years ago, there was an article in the paper that the handicapper for Canterbury Park in the Star and Tribune, he left to get a job with Fox Sports Net. And it was actually the rival paper where I read it at. It wasn't even a Star Tribune. And I'm like, oh, I could do that. I've been handicapping horse races for years, so I put this resume together. And actually, you know, the things I did in life, of all the things that I've done, I mean, this is the one job I never thought I would do. This is the one job I never thought I'd have a chance. It worked out. Because if you tell people that you put a resume together and a letter, and you've never done that before in your whole life, and now you're 47 and you have to do that, and you send it in, and then the editor gives you a call back, I was more shocked than that than anything I've done in my life. And so that's how that all came about. It was just reading a story in the paper and sending a letter into the editor saying, yeah, I think I'd be a good handicapper.
Now, for those of us, like myself, to be very honest, what does that mean? What does it mean to be a handicapper? Like, you don't have to break down, you know, every last bit of it, but how do you do it? And yeah, let's just start there, because I think starting there is a good point.
Well, first thing, like what I do for the paper is I analyze every race. So I will write about the top 3 horses, my selections, who I think are the top 3 choices for that race, and I will write a line about each one of them. And you can go online and see my work. Like for tonight's races at Canterbury Park, I write about 3 or 4 horses each race, but mostly 3, and I pick the winners, who I think's going to win. For the novice fan that goes to Canterbury, or for someone who, you know, is a fan of mine, likes to read my stuff, they'll take the newspaper and they'll say, okay, Johnny, I'll pick this horse. This is who I'll bet. It's not for the person who's been playing horses for years. They have their own system. But it's for the novice fan that like to try to put a couple bucks on a horse, and they use my suggestions to play the horses. With that said, Canterbury also has a couple wonderful handicappers, so they'll use those too. But that's what they do. They get up, they read the paper, who I like, and maybe they'll make a choice using my selection. So that's what I do for the Star Tribune. As a handicapper, you're trying to make money playing these horses, which takes years. The best handicappers are middle-aged people. It's not, you never see good handicappers that are 20 years old. It's not going to happen. There's just so much information out there that you need to go over and learn. I'll tell you, Stephen, it takes over 10 years to become a good handicapper. Minimum over 10 years because of all the information you need to learn about each race. So, basically we all study past performances of each horse of their previous races. So what you're doing is you're reading their past performances to predict the future. That's what we do. So each morning I get up, I get the daily racing form, which I've been a member of since, close to 10 years now, and I study each race, and I write down my suggestions, and I go from there.
No, you may have said this earlier. Like, how did you even get into that? Is that something that you picked up from somebody else, your dad or something like that? I mean, how do you get into it?
I did this video last week for Canterbury about handicappers. So I think it was myself and Paul Allen, who's the track announcer there, who's also the voice of the Minnesota Vikings, and then a couple other handicappers, Angela's the paddock announcer. But we saw this video, and I was asked that question, and I got to be honest, I really don't know. I remember, it's not all the drugs and alcohol in my past that I don't remember. It's just, I really don't know. I remember being a kid watching Secretariat. I remember that, and I don't know why that stuck in my head. I remember Canterbury opened up in 1985. At that time, it was Canterbury Downs. But at that time, I was just, finishing up college. I just went out there to see if I could pick up chicks and drink some beer and try to make some money to horses. I didn't know what I was doing. But somewhere when I got out of wrestling and owning the gym, I remember reading racing forms. But if you ever see the racing forms, there's so many numbers and so many symbols. I didn't know what half of them meant. Or if any of them meant. I was like, really? I got to learn all this? But I took years to finally understand all the symbols and the numbers. And I do remember getting books, but I couldn't even tell you the title of the books. I was just studying. And I would practice picking my horses, not with real money, just with Monopoly money at these races and see if I was close to being what I could do. And I think good handicappers today, and all of them say the same, you got to lose a lot before you become a good handicapper. I mean, it's great winning. It's great winning, but you're going to lose. Everybody loses. It's a game.
Yeah.
It's trying to win at a consistent basis. That's what you're trying to do. So that's the best I can give you. I remember Secretariat. I was 10, and I remember going to Canterbury when I was in college, drinking beer and trying to pick up girls and put in a couple tickets, and I must have got hooked. But yeah, I don't even think I even hit a big that night or anything. It was just a fun time for me.
So you've been a handicapper for what, 7 or 8 years, or a little bit longer?
I would say longer. I've been longer. I got my job 3 years ago, but I've been probably playing consistently 4 or 5 days a week, close to 15 years. And there's been good times and there's been bad times, and I've hit some big tickets. And it's like I said that, it's like horse racing, as far as gambling, is different than cards. It's different than going to a casino because there's so much studying involved compared to, and don't get me wrong, the card players out there, which I really don't do, but I mean, you're playing against your opponent. And the slot machines, that's just luck. And if you're playing football, you're reading lines in the paper, but are you really studying, or are you buying tip sheets, or are you just going on a hunch? With horse racing, if you really want to get at it, I mean, I study an hour and a half, close to 2 hours for every card. I really don't know if that happens in the other things I just mentioned as far as gambling. So for the most part, gamblers in horse racing, it's hard to explain, but it doesn't have the same personality as other gamblers where you can find yourself in trouble. The addiction's there, obviously, but I think you're a little more. I'm trying to think of the word I'm looking for. I don't want to.
Well, there's a buffer. There's a buffer there because you can't just. And I'm not saying this like I have experienced it, but you have to work at your craft. I don't want to say that gambling or playing a slot is a craft. But what it seems to me from how you're explaining handicapping, I mean, it's borderline a science. I mean, it's a little bit. It's more of an art than a science, but it's pretty close. In that regard. So there's there's no way that you can be on top, if you will, and be reckless.
No, you know, and that's the point I'm trying to make, is that you're more conservative. You're more conservative. You're just not chasing. Yeah, if you're a drink, you're going to chase. That's just the way life is. But, you know, for me, is when I give a talk about handicapping or speak about handicapping, I try to tell everybody, play what you're good at. You know, play what you're good at. Have a game plan before you get to the track. If you're going to get to the track and you're just going to start playing every race, you're going to lose. You can't play every race. I never play every race. I play certain races that I think I have a chance at winning. So, you know, for me, is I have everything written out, so I know what my tickets are going to be. But you know what? Having fun at the track lasts a lot longer than winning ticket, David. So, unless it's a life changer, then that's a different story.
So, I mean, you said you've been doing this for about 15 years, and
yep.
I mean, obviously, you're having fun with it. How, I would say in the last, let's just say 5 years, give or take, technology has been infused in all levels of sport. How has it helped you in handicapping? And what more advancements can take it to a level where I don't want to say it makes it easier for you, because that's a very general, even lazy word to use, but how can it make you better, if it's possible?
Well, you know, like you were saying about today's world and the science, there's so much data out there today. Now, when I first started, we had the Daily Racing Form, which is the paper which came with all the past performances, which I still use. I just get it on my computer. And that's all I use. But you can download software that picks the horses for you, which I know some guys use. You can buy tip sheets galore from people who say, okay, this is, you know, for every track, these are the certain plays. And you can add like 3 or 4 different types of programs and put them together and say, okay, I narrowed it down to 3 horses now. You know, the same as far as the track, you know, as far as Canterbury has really taken off with simulcast betting, because they're on the horse racing network, which they'll be tonight, which is TVG. TVG network shows Canterbury on Thursday night, so the money for the Pick 4 has taken off. Well, once again, you go to TVG, their handicappers are going to give you advice. When I started, this advice wasn't around. Not that I would want some of that advice. It's just there. You know, when you're seeing people from all ages play now, where it used to be, you never seen the younger crowd. You go to Canterbury on a Thursday night when it's buck night, when they're selling dollar beers and hot dogs and stuff. The college kids are out there. I mean, they draw a great crowd. They do that across the nation. You know, so as far as data, there's tons of it out there, good and bad. When I started, it was a Daily Racing Form, and that was it. That's all you had. Before my time, you didn't even have that. So, you know, I'm old school. I still just use the Daily Racing Form, and that's all I use, except I just use it on my computer.
You know, and I think the cool thing about that, well, let me not say cool. Yeah. Okay,
you can use groovy if you want.
Nah, that's not my style. But the cool thing about that is that you know it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that a lot of, and this is for sports, for business, for whatever, I think because we have more at our fingertips, we try to use more, when at the end of the day, you know, I mean, you use what works. If you're a writer, use pen and paper and just write. I mean, yeah, you
Absolutely.
can graduate to a laptop or a computer, but I mean, as long as you're getting your ideas down, or you're getting your work done on a form or through an avenue, or I don't know, it might be an app, it might be, like you said, an online form or whatever. I mean, as long as you're doing it and you're confident in it, I mean, that takes out any it takes out that doubt, you know, because I can imagine in handicapping, you know, I'm sure you've probably seen the rookies or the the novices who have their horses or their rabbit's foot and their charms and all that. I mean, that doesn't really have anything to do with it for the most part. I mean, it kind of does, if you will, but that's not. You tell me. That doesn't really play a part in the whole process.
Well, you know as well as I do, with any sport, with anything you do in life, if things start going wrong, you start making changes. All right, in the gambling, you start making changes, then you start using other people's advice because there's money involved. It's the same thing with sports. If you're not hitting the baseball, well, I'm going to change my stance. And with horse racing, if you get on a run and you start hitting, you feel pretty good about yourself, and you continue that run. It's the same thing with losing. You start losing and betting, then you start chasing, then you start taking this guy's advice, or you start taking her advice, or I'll just pick a color this time. Maybe I'll get lucky. And, everything's a roller coaster when it comes to that. But, for me, that's why I tell people, bet what you're good at. I am a pick 3, pick 4 type of player, which are picking 3 or 4 winners in a row. Some people are better at playing exactas and trifectas. And that's what they should stick at. You should always play what you're good at, because in horse racing, there's so many different types of bets. They have expanded over the years. Pick 5s, pick 3s, pick 6s, daily doubles, exactas, win, place, show. I mean, it goes on and on and on. But it's really important to stick what you're good at instead of playing all these bets. David, I see one guy just sticks out in my mind, and it's just like, it's not just because he's a degenerate gambler, but I see him go up there with like 15 or 20 tickets, and I'm like, what do you think? You're going to hit every ticket? I mean, do you really think you're going to hit every ticket? I mean, if it was that easy, I would just follow him around. But, that's the different side of the world. There's sad stories like that guy. And he is a degenerate gambler, and he's not very conservative at it. So.
Wow. So, I mean, we talked about the tech side of it. We talked about it not being like gambling in very important ways. Where do you see the future of it? You said earlier let's just say it takes at least 15 years to be good at handicapping. Where do you see the future of it? Do you see a younger crowd being serious about it, or do you see it pretty much being what it is now, where it's like, the diehards, the guys who are really interested in it, they just stick to it, and they're very few and far between.
Horse racing is growing, and I'm glad you asked that, because there are a lot of naysayers, and there was a huge story this past winter in the New York Times about the bad stuff that goes on in horse racing. Well, not putting heads. There's bad things that go on in all sports, in all points of life. And what they did, which a lot of us, people that love the game, they touched on a couple bad tracks and horses that had to be put down and stuff, but they didn't talk about any of the positive stuff. They talked about negative people. The Kentucky Derby this year had its highest rating, I believe, ever when it was on NBC. The attendance at the Kentucky Derby was the largest ever, and they continue with the Preakness, and it's part of the fact that they're drawing the younger card to the races. Canterbury is a perfect example. I say this all the time. Canterbury is a place where I could take my family. I could take them there on a Thursday or Friday night. Friday night is called happy hour, the best happy hour in town. I still feel safe taking my 2 kids there. And so it's drawing the younger people, but Canterbury does a really good job of making everybody feel welcome. I don't have to worry about a knucklehead being drunk in front of my kids doing something stupid. And there's a lot of young kids, and I know they're trying to appease the young kids to come there for these buck nights and happy hours, but they're doing a good job, and the younger people are really getting into it. But you could see after watching the Kentucky Derby of the numbers it drew on TV and the attendance there, and the pool sizes are growing. The money that's coming in is in the millions of dollars for the Triple Crown races. And then we have the Breeders' Cup in November, which is the biggest, and that's going to be huge this year, out of California, and that's going to draw big numbers. So it's getting bigger. You can see it's getting bigger just by the numbers of the pool sizes, the attendance, the ratings on TV. I mean, I got to tell you, if you haven't seen horse racing in HD, you got to watch it. I mean, it's awesome. It's unbelievable. I mean, when watching on NBC is pretty darn cool. Whether you gamble or not, you know, watch the sport. It's a beautiful event. It's the best 2 minutes in sports, right?
Yeah. I mean, like, after talking to you, and I'm not saying this, you know, to just, you know, butter you up or anything, but, like, what I've realized is that I grew up in a very narrow sports vision, if you will, and there's so many cool, and I'm saying cool, we could even say groovy. I mean, there's so many cool little niches in sports that you can make a career out of, or you could be totally passionate about, like you talked about. And, yeah, maybe it's not ESPN Monday Night Football, okay? Yeah, obviously. There's only one or two of those in the sports landscape. But, I mean, handicapping sounds so cool. And it sounds like something that you can be, dare I say, a mad scientist about, but still be normal and regular. You can like, get totally engrossed in it and just learn over, I mean, if you invest the time to learn over, you know, many years, it can be something that is just, it's fun. It's like playing, maybe not Monopoly, but it's like playing a board game every day and just having the joy of winning, but also knowing that it wasn't luck, you know? And that's awesome.
You're right. You know, and for me, David, to get up every morning and do what I do, I feel blessed. I really do. I mean, I can't remember one time in the past few years where I had to write about horse races. I'm like, oh, not today. That's been one time, and that's how much I enjoy it. There's another guy out there. He worked a TV reporter guy, and I met him through Twitter. He goes by Dan Anonymous. He has built his own website and has so many followers. He does such a good job for the sport. And I think about this guy. He's gone from a TV reporter to doing his passion, you know, of horse racing. And he's been to some of the biggest races. He interviews these jockeys and trainers. He gets all the big names. And here's a guy that just started, I would say it's been a year and a half, 2 years ago when I first talked to him on Twitter. he had like, you know, hardly any followers. Now he's one of the biggest names out there when people want to talk about horse racing handicapping. And his website's great. So good for him. I mean, that's just one of the stories, you know.
That's awesome. Now, do you have any horses, or are you just you're just the man behind the formulas and the forms that you fill out every night?
I am glad you asked that. I just bought into a couple of horses with Zilla Racing Stables out of New York, and I do have partnership in a couple horses, and one that we're very proud of, looking forward to, is a 2-year-old filly named Little Zilla, and she's going to be racing in Saratoga this coming August. And that is going to be pretty exciting because I haven't been involved in that part of the sport, so needless to say, I'll probably be like a little kid when that race goes out. So, Little Zilla, she's a 2-year-old filly, and she'll be having her first race this August at Saratoga, so I hope to fly out there for that.
That's awesome. Now, I mean, we're getting towards the end of the interview, and I have to ask this, and you said some pretty useful things throughout the course of this interview, this conversation. What are some of the lessons that you've learned? Maybe not every single last one of them, maybe not 2 or 3 big ones, but what are some where you just look back at just how you recounted your story, you know, in this conversation where you're just like, you know, I'm so glad I stuck to this principle, or I did, you know, or I was patient in this arena or whatever. Can you think of 1 or 2 of those?
Well, as far as everything, I'm glad that everything I've done, that I stuck it out. I mean, I can go back from all my sports in high school, college, where I should probably never been, but after roofing, I realized that this wasn't for me. And like I said, I wasn't that smart of a kid, but I stuck out everything I did, and that's playing 2 to 3 sports from park board to high school. I stuck out 4 years playing football in college. It took me 4.5 to graduate. When I became a pro wrestler, I could have quit early on after I told you what I got paid the first 2 matches. Most pro wrestlers don't last a year or two. I lasted 8, almost 8. Now the gym, 16 years. That was a long time. And now I'm in my 3rd year of being a handicapper, and I could see me doing that for a long time. My health is good and stuff. So, it's all about having a passion, which, we talked about before. But, man, you just got to love what you do, and you got to wake up every morning going, God, I'm lucky. I'm really lucky I get to do that. As far as handicapping, what I mentioned before is play what you're good at. Don't chase. There's no reason to play every race on the card. Relax, get a burger, something to drink, and watch the race. And then, what I like to do, I tell people, find a horse that you like, and then work your tickets around that horse instead of just going on a hunch play. There's no such thing in racing. You might get lucky and win one, but you'll lose all that money if you just keep playing that way. So be consistent, play what you're good at, and stick with that. If you lose, so what? You might punch the steering wheel on the way home, but don't let it ruin your life. Just come back the next day. That's a great thing about horse racing. I can find a race any day of the week. I find one on Christmas. I can find one on Thanksgiving. But you always just come back the next day. That's the great thing about life.
Awesome. Come back the next day. So what are some of your future goals? You kind of said it at the very tail end of that. Just continue to you have a horse, you have a filly, you're settling in as a handicapper. Anything else?
Well, I would like, we do these TV selection shows at Canterbury, and I do like 3 or 4 a year, and that's fun to do. I would like, each year for me with Canterbury and with the Star Tribune has been baby steps where we have done more each year, and it's been growing. Canterbury's grown each year. I don't want to go too far back, but they did a big deal with one of the casinos here last year, and it was an $88 million deal for 10 years. So they have grown. I would like to see me grow with them, obviously, and do more TV stuff and help them whatever I can, because I think that I can help them with my services, handicapping, TV, and selections and stuff like that. So one day at a time type of thing. But, I just want to continue what I'm doing and maybe hopefully do a little more stuff with Canterbury.
Awesome. Now, where are some of the places we can find you online? You mentioned you have a site.
Well, I'm on Twitter. Twitter, I am StribLove, StriblOVE. I also have a website that people pay me for selections called exoticplays.com. It is not a porn site. It's a horse racing site. It's EXOTIC plays.com. People can find me there. And they can find me at the Minneapolis Star Tribune, startribune.com. And you can type in Johnny Love, and my selections will come up.
That's awesome.
So there's 3 Johnnies right there.
Okay. Well, Johnny, this has been fun. From horse handicapping, from being a professional wrestler. And I knew there was a story there, but this has been fun hearing that story.
Not a bad gimmick. Not a bad story to tell my kids someday.
Yeah, I could just see you saying, grandson, you don't know how much fun I've had. Like, really, Grandpa? You don't do anything now. They're like, well, let me tell you back in the day.
You just watch horse races all day long.
Yeah, you just watch horse racing all day long in your easy chair. You don't do anything. Well, let me tell you about professional wrestling in Europe. That's gonna
yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, yeah, I've been fortunate. I've had an interesting life and had my ups and downs like everybody, but just one of the guys that just like to try different things and move on and stay young at the age of 50 and just keep plugging along.
That's awesome. Well, I just want to thank you for doing this interview on thesportsbackroom.com. It was fun.
I appreciate it. I enjoyed talking to you, and I wish you the best success with what you're doing, and I think you do a great job, so I really appreciate it.
Thank you, and thank you, everybody, for being a part of it.
All right, David.